Fantastic. We'll get started then. Welcome everyone to the 16th TIA Centre Seminar of the academic year. And it's fantastic to be joined today by Dan from Radboud UMC. So Dan studied biomedical engineering at the University of Twente and specialised in image and diagnostics. Subsequently, he finished his master's thesis segmenting tumour by applying deep learning on fluorescent multiplex breast cancer images in 2019. In the same period, he finished the master's study science education and communication in physics and works as a secondary school physics teacher. In March 2020, he started as a PhD candidate in the computational pathology group and diagnostic image analysis group, where he works under the supervision of Geert Litjens and Vitor Amir, automating skin cancer diagnostics. Next to his research, Dan played a crucial role in building a platform which allowed large-scale extraction of medical data, both pathology and radiology, and integrating AI algorithms in the clinical workflow. Dan was also recently featured in a leading Dutch newspaper as one of the top 50 talents of the Netherlands. And the title of Dan's talk today is Dealing with the Wave, Automating Skin Cancer Assessment. So yeah, thank you very much for joining us here today, Dan. And we're really excited to hear you talk.
Well, thank you for the large introduction. Does seem a lot if you sum it up. And also thanks for the invitation. Feel like a rock star being flown over from the Netherlands to here. Never did that, so this is also a first for me. And it's nice to have so many people here in this room. So yeah, the title here, and I'm still debating with Geert Litjens. Maybe you know him. From a Radboud, I'll show his face later. We're still debating if the wave is big enough. He says it needs to be more dramatic, but it kind of shows what we are facing at the moment. We are now currently nice in the sun, but we will facing a wind. And I will get back to that. And that's kind of what I did for 4 years with my PhD. But I added some slides because I felt like maybe let's introduce the Radboud UMC first. So that's our new hospital that we see there. And we are forming now the computational pathology group. I did there for 4 years my PhD. I also did my master's there. I really liked it there, so that's why I stick there for a bit. And for the people, here is the beautiful Netherlands, and Nijmegen is there. So it's more on the eastern part of the Netherlands. Here's a nice overview of Nijmegen, so you have kind of an idea what kind of city it is. I think the bridge is actually pretty known because Nijmegen got bombed heavily during the Second World War, and that bridge was the one the Allied forces crossed, and the second one in Arnhem was a bridge too far. So this was all part of Operation Market Garden. So you always also see in the movies this bridge, pretty iconic for Nijmegen. And also you see there the river, we call it the Waal, but if it's from Germany, it's called the Rhine. So it's one of the big rivers that end in the Netherlands in the sea. So yeah, I really like it. It's a very old city. Nijmegen always promotes it as being the oldest city of the Netherlands. It's debatable with Maastricht, but they're always fighting over it. And also has to do because a lot of the Romans kind of ended here, their empire, because there is this big river. So it also has a lot of traces of the Roman Empire still there. We're very proud of that. It's a nice and chill city. That's also kind of how they call it. I think their slogan is "Old City, Young Vibes." Oh. And who are those young people in this city? This is our group. So this is our computational pathology group. You see, we really grew a lot. All PhD candidates or postdocs working on the same modalities. So it's pathology and computational pathology. And in the faculty, you see now we are with 4. So Jeroen van der Laak, Geert Litjens, Francesco Chiompi, and Nadia Khalili. And they're all leading this group. So Geert recently became professor. Jeroen also, Francesco is working hard to also become a professor. And Nadia is in the gender track to also go along the same route. We kind of divided for every part. So Geert mainly focused on now on multimodal, doing multimodal research. We did a lot of weekly supervised learning in there. So we kind of split along every professor the stuff we do. But we do overlap. We do have a lot of overlapping research, and I think that's very fun. In our group, we also work together a lot. Because yeah, why do you need 6 batch loaders if you can just make one properly? So that's what I really like. And as the computational pathology group, we are part of a much larger group. So here you see everyone, and that's DAF Nijmegen. And I put kind of all the modalities there that I kind of came to my mind. And it's also very nice to work with them together. So especially multimodal is something you see now a lot of happening, doing registration of MRI and CT or PET CT, and then combined pathology, for example. So that's what we also do a lot. And at the end, it's just a different modality. Of course, every modality has its own challenges, but the models, the way you ingest the data, it looks very similar. So it makes sense to work together, and we really like to do that. Okay. Important part about Nijmegen and having a large group. You always can find nice people to hang out after work. So, for example, here is a nice square where we go with colleagues. Because yeah, if you have a pool of 100, you can always find some victims to go with you to the city. And that one is nice. It's called Brewery the Heaven. Well, you can imagine why it's called Heaven. And in the summer, it's really nice to go, for example, there on the beaches of the Waal to spend the hot summer night there. So, and also we have the, I don't know if you know it, we have the Vierdaagse. It's also called the Walk of the World. It's came down from a military march, kind of to, I think, to commemorate Operation Market Garden. No, I think they already did it before the Second World War, actually. And it was a military march, and at some point they say like everyone can join. So it's a massive event. A lot of countries are participating. It's still a military march, so you see also from all the countries a big military parade. So you have a lot of people walking there. Nice thing is you also have 7 days of party in the whole city. So this is just one square, and then you have another square, and it all happens at the same time. So it attracts a lot of people. And I think if you are in Nijmegen at this time, definitely, or if you are in the Netherlands, definitely go here. It's a great event. It's a unique event because it's such a long party and it's completely free. Okay, that was a bit about Nijmegen and our group. So let's dissect my title a bit. So there are 3 components here. So a little bit about skin cancer, about the assessment, and why we are automating it. So you see there's still this umbrella, no wave, everything is happy, everything is good. So let's start with this bit of skin cancer. In the Netherlands, for example, but I think the same numbers hold for the UK, because we just are not very good, or our skin is not very compatible with the sun. So in the Netherlands, if we look through the entire diagnostic workflow, what comes in, half of it are skin cancer diagnoses. And if we look at these numbers, so these are, I think, the major groups that forms of cancer. You see of this 50% of skin cancer, a very large part is basal cell carcinoma. And basal cell carcinoma, being the most common one, has the benefit, luckily, that it's not very deadly. So the chances that you die from a basal cell carcinoma is very low, but it does affect your skin. So it kind of grows and grows and grows. So at some point, you need to treat it. This number increases. In the Netherlands, we now are at 70,000 new patients, but we see these numbers increasing, and all these patients need to get treated. And it looks a little bit like this. So a patient comes in with some suspicious spot. Most of the time, they start itching or bleeding or whatever. So they think, I need to go to the GP. So this is what we do in the Netherlands. So they go to the GP, and he kind of filters out, and he thinks like, oh yeah, it looks suspicious. Please go to the hospital, and then you visit the dermatologist. Dermatologist thinks, okay, GP was right. I think it's maybe basal cell carcinoma. And then they always take a biopsy just to confirm that it's a basal cell carcinoma. For melanoma, for example, that's differently, that they absolutely don't do a biopsy. Because you don't want to touch this too much. But if they think it's a BCC, they take a biopsy. Then we get into this workflow. And this one, I put some more effort in explaining it, because here the pathology comes in. Of course, we are a computational pathology group, so we really focus on this part. So you see The biopsy comes in, and then the pathologist has to do two tasks. So first, determine, is it actually basal cell carcinoma? Is it not a squamous cell carcinoma, for example, or some non-malignant disease? Because I think there are a lot of skin diseases. And if it's BCC, they have to determine the subtype. And the subtype is important because based on the subtype, the dermatologist knows how much to cut away. For less invasive subtypes, you can imagine that you can cut away less tissue because it's not grown very far into the tissue. And then the second time, the pathologist comes in again, and then he or she has to check whether everything was cut away, if the margins were correctly and everything is removed. And most of the times, because these margins are so wide, there is no BCC left in the tissue. Another way of removing it, and that's called Mohs micrographic surgery, it takes more time, and that's why we use it for the face, for example, because with these subtypes, we just have some margin. I don't know how they came up with these numbers, but it's plenty enough to remove everything. But you can imagine in the face, you don't want to do that. So if it's here on your eyelid or on your nose, you don't want to cut away half of your nose if it's not necessary. So that's why they do the Mohs micrographic surgery. They're doing very tiny bits. They cut away tissue. They check if everything is gone, and otherwise they keep cutting. So it's like piece by piece by piece. And in a perfect world, when it's the dermatologist in the operation room and there's a pathologist on site. So they quickly freeze the tissue, they make a slice, and then determine if the margins are free. But well, in practice, there's not always a pathologist. So it's mainly the dermatologist who needs to do a pathology assessment. So there's also a piece where we think we can help. Okay, there's the wave. A tiny wave, but it's a big wave. Because again, numbers from the Netherlands, if we see basal cell carcinoma, it's really increasing. So over the years, it's increasing more rapidly than the population, and it mainly has to do with people becoming older. The generation before us, sun protection was not that common. I think even my grandmother always told me that you have to use olive oil because then you can a nice tan skin. Well, now we know that you shouldn't do that, but yeah, that was kind of the world back then. So we now kind of face the consequences because a lot of these skin cancers are sun-induced, so they play a big role in that. And it's something not only in the Netherlands, so you see in every European country, you see this rise, and especially like the closer, so the more light-skinned you are, and the closer you get to the sun, you see these numbers just rising, especially Australia, but also think about Florida and the United States, they really have a lot of these cases. For example, Australia has 100 times more cases than in Northern Europe, so they really face a lot of these cases. So it really screams for automation. So it's not very deadly. You have a very high frequency. It's a relatively easy task. So yeah, you should automate it. So that's why during my project, we focus on these 3 parts. 3 times pathology assessment and 3 times it's a different task and to see if we can help that with deep learning. So I will focus first on this first task. So, and this is of publication of mine. So here we, what we first did is like really to pack the tissue as compact as possible, mainly from a technical perspective, because there's a lot of white space, and it's just easier to handle. So you see here, first in blue, we did some tissue segmentation. In this case, I just trained a very simple dense net on my own data set, just annotate 50 of them very quickly in one day, and it already works. And then we packed it. So it's the most optimal way to put these images next to each other. Because what we want to do is we want to make a square around this tissue. And then you can ask, why are you doing that? And that has to do with streaming, what we applied. So Hans came up with this idea. Well, it's not a quote of Hans, but you can kind of imagine Hans sitting there and saying, why are we patching our whole slide images? Because yeah, it's now like the bread and butter of starting your model. but it doesn't make any sense. And this is also because it's just due to a limitation that we patch our images rather than that it has any benefit. So Hans came up with this idea, like how can we make sure that we feed in the whole image rather than patching up? Because if you patch stuff, you are losing context, and we don't want to lose it. Also, for an end-to-end application, the patching also, it's an extra step in your pipeline, and it costs time. So you want to remove it because it's there due to technical limitations. So he came up with a very smart solution to get rid of this patching, and I will explain that a little bit later. Because then came Stefan, maybe some of you know him because he's involved in the big picture project. And he and Hans, they thought like, okay, CLAM from Basal Mahmoud, it's working very well. Can't we do this in a streaming way? So we are not patching everything. We are just making sure that we can feed this whole image through the model. So the model sees everything. Also has some perks. For example, you can do augmentation because all these other, for example, CLAM first encodes and then feeds it through the model, which doesn't allow for augmentation, for example. So here is a streaming 101 crash course because I think the reason that it's not used a lot is because it's a bit complicated to get or wrap your head around. But if you understand it, then you understand why it makes sense. So I try to explain it here. And Hans, if you're now listening, I'm sorry if I'm butchering your work, but so you see why we make a square, because if you make a square, you can get like square chunks out of it. And the idea of Hans was that like this first layer in your whatever architecture you have, that's always the heaviest one, because there if you are going to feed in a whole image of pixels, it doesn't fit into your GPU memory. So the idea is to take a square out of your image as large as possible that can fit through this first layer. So you can kind of encode your first layer, and you see there in the second layer where it kind of holds. So you take one square, you feed it through the first layer, you kind of hold this intermediate. And what Hans discovered is that you can kind of stack up these parts, and they are exactly the same as that you did a whole image. So you kind of patch it up and then stitch it back together just to survive this first layer, because that's the one that's causing the GPU bottleneck. And then from there, if you kind of stitch everything together and it fits into your GPU, you can just continue as it was like a normal world. So then you can go all the way to the back. Then you can do your want to update your gradients. You can exactly do the same again, but at the moment you are hitting this layer due to the GPU memory, there you do it one by one. So you are updating one by one the gradients, and then you can stitch it together.
That's a question, sorry. So in terms of, in the original image, you put there's four whole slide images that make up this big, maybe a whole slide image.
Mm-hmm.
So why are you adding them together if you then patch them again apart?
So we patch them just to survive like the memory thing. So like the biggest part that's possible that can fit into your memory. And then you are allowed, so that's what Hans saw, then you can stitch them together, and then it fits into your GPU. So then the model has seen the whole image. So it's not patching, it's not updating patch based on a patch. You are feeding the whole image through the model.
But I suppose what I'm trying to get at is in terms of why you need to stitch together different whole slide images as opposed to just, so for instance, there's four whole slide images there.
Four?
Is that, am I looking at this wrong?
Well, no,
or is it the same?
It's one.
Okay.
It wasn't, but we first packed it
Oh, right,
to make it to make the image as small as possible, because then we don't have to do a lot of back and forth, because there's a lot of white space. So we first reduce the white space and make like the smallest whole slide image. Yeah, okay, they are looking at 4 copies of it, but it's one whole slide image.
Okay, sorry.
And again, always reach out to Stefan or Hans, because I think they can explain this better. The nice thing is that you now can do it end to end, because I can now just give the whole slide images. I don't need to do any, well, I did the pre-processing of the stitching, but yeah, that's a very easy pre-processing compared to patching. And we also see the results that if you give these whole slide images, you are also delivering the whole context there. So it's if you look for the task just to find a positive or negative BCC, we don't see very large differences compared to CLAMP, which is really a patch-based method. So these AUCs are very close to each other. And I'm not the person who is going to say because it's 0.1 higher that it's better. They're just similar. So I wouldn't advocate here that it's better. The cool thing is because we also wanted to do this low risk and high risk comparison that we see that it became a bit stronger, but still they are in confidence intervals which are kind of overlapping. So also here they are similar on the external and the internal. And here on CLAMP you see the external one on the external data set already lagging a bit behind. And that mainly has to do because we noticed that the streaming CLAMP is a little bit better at kind of generalizing, because he sees these all images rather than really being good at patch level. I think I lost a slide in here, but there we kind of put, you can look it up in my paper, but we then noticed I trained both models with like 1% of my data set, 5%, 50%, and 100. But especially when you have less data, you see that streaming CLAMP, the confidence intervals are very small. So it kind of quickly converged to a in understanding the problems that we wanted to see. So there it really helped. We also checked if the low risk and high risk, if that was comparable with pathologists, and there we're in the similar ranges. So the only thing here you see, that's why there's like it performs less, because here you get into the domain of inter-observer variability. And still, if you ask like another pathologist, they always like doubting, but at the end it doesn't make it's not a big problem, because it's at the end just the margin which are having smaller or bigger, but it gets checked anyway at the end. So if you have a bad pathologist that does a lot of over treatment, then you cut away a lot of tissue. Again, if it's on the back of your skin, nobody cares, I would say. Cool thing about the streaming CLAMP is that you always also get like a little bit more fine-grained attention maps, because you don't have to restore it from these patches, but you get it on like the whole slide, and you can immediately get the attention map. And then we noticed that also with these attention maps, that the model really aims at having the tumor as the discriminator between the problem. So kind of showed that it was not doing some randomness or found some random thing, but it was really focusing on the tumor. So using that as a discriminator. And I think that's also a nice catch. You have these nice attention maps. So we also tried to find the BCC in the proven slides, but they're more for the dermatologist, because yeah, they have a lot of slides. They cut everything in pieces to figure out where this margin is. And they really just want to know, like, is there tumor in the slide, yes or no? And there we could kind of apply the same. So we also did the same. There you see AUCs dropping a bit, mainly has to do with these frozen sections. They just look worse because they're very quickly frozen in nitrogen. So you have way more artifacts. I think if you want to bump up this number, we have to increase our data set. You see, because the heterogeneity of all these images is just way larger than a very strict protocolized paraffin embedding. And here we did use these attention maps, because here we thought like, okay, but maybe we can, like, the dermatologist is not a pathologist. So the pathologist is very good at quickly finding this BCC, one of the most easiest tasks. But the dermatologists, yeah, they're not very trained for that. So they do maybe need this help. And here we try to fine tune these attention maps a bit. So here you see an example with the ground truth in there. And the attention map really kind of perfectly falling into this ground truth. Again, like, we didn't need any annotations. We just need a slide level label and the model comes up with which parts are relevant for its prediction. We're pretty happy with that. Of course, you also see positives, because an intention map doesn't mean that it's only focusing on tumor. It's kind of showing all the relevant parts which contributed to giving the label positive. So maybe some other parts are also contributing to that in a negative or positive way. You don't know. We did some filtering, and there you see, like, if we drop out one of these smaller parts, you can imagine, like, okay, what is a dermatologist interested in? Do they just want to know where the big field of the tumor is, or do they really want to find the small fields? The specialists tell me that they just want to see if there's tumor, yes or no. So if you are missing very small bits, if you focus on the large part, this can already be useful. So I tried here the filtering, and you see, if you want to reduce the false positives, you can just lower the threshold, and then it increases. And then you can debate over what is a good threshold, yes or no, but it's also useful for clinical practice. So that's something we are now doing with the reader study. We do this via Grand Challenge, which I think is a very nice platform for doing that. And there we give the label to the dermatologist. So we say, like, okay, we are 97% certain there's tumor in here. By default, they don't see the heat map, but if they want, they can use this attention map to kind of verify for themselves if it's really the tumor, or maybe they don't see it, but just to get kind of their attention focused to the right spot. And then they have to say how certain they are, and we kind of bin this in what it is as a clinical choice. So I think the choices are: I'm very certain I will check out this case myself, or I'm certain, but I will ask my colleague. And so we kind of have this clinical step. We relate it to the certainty. Because at the end, we want to know if you give these AI to a dermatologist, maybe they get more certain about the way they work. I think that's also already a huge gain. Then a bit about the integration, because I think the project I started with was really focused on integration. Like, really, maybe we can help, because it's such a frequent task. Where can we make some gains? And 4 years later, I still know it's a very hard topic. You think, like, if you have the model that you are there, but I realize it's super hard to actually get what the specialist needs. So here is the viewer we use, the pathologist from Sectra. And you could say, okay, this is perfect. This is like AI integrated in Sectra. But I was super happy when I had this, super fancy. It shows where the tumor is. It shows which boxes contain the tumor. And then the pathologist says, like, yeah, but I can also do that within 1 second. So what are we gaining here? And I was a bit disappointed, like, yeah, spent 4 years on this, and it's not very useful, but I think it's really here, like, in the way how you integrate it. So then I asked, like, what do you need? And they said, oh, but I need to make a report, and that costs a lot of time. But then I kind of pivoted away, like, okay, how can I present this information in a report? And then you just use an LLM, for example, which kind of translate the labels from your model into a sentence. And then she was happy. She's like, oh, now you saved me work. So yeah, it's really still figuring out what they actually need. Even though we work together a lot, she also didn't realize yet how it could help her. So I think it's something we should focus on. So that's my last work. I hope I can finish it within my PhD, because I think it's also the most ambitious project, is that I want to know this whole pipeline, if we can evaluate it that, like, what if we would integrate AI in here? How do we handle dangerous cases, for example? What if I present a melanoma? The model should never treat it as being a BCC, because then you get under-treatment. So that's something we should know. Well, the last step, the resection margin, I also need to incorporate that. I really want to make a number about, like, okay, if we put AI in here, it does make some mistakes. What is the final performance if we would incorporate it in a whole clinical pipeline? And I think that's also what we are missing at the moment in the field. We don't know if we are, we're still hunting for this 100% achievement, but maybe we are already there. Maybe with 70% accuracy, you're already saving so much time versus like the people that get overdiagnosed or underdiagnosed. We don't know yet what the benchmark is that we should achieve. So I hope to kind of shed a bit of light on that with this work. The last thing I want to show you is the data set that I made, because I also realized that data is really important for the work. I think here we are lucky that we are in a pathology department, so like getting the data there, getting it labeled is a little bit easier, but not everyone has that. I decided not to make my data set for a single purpose, but to kind of do all sorts of things. So I built it up so you can do like pre-training. You could just pull all the images and pre-train on it. You can use it for out of distribution, because skin has a lot of different types of diseases. So I kind of show how you can bin it in such a way you can use it for out of distribution. You can use the classification, because I have all the labels, and I also still have a lot of drawn annotations, so you can also test it or benchmark your segmentation model. So I really want to make a multi-purpose data set out of it, which kind of also helps people that are not working on skin. I'm also working together with a company called Kilt. I think they're pretty cool. They index all the buckets from AWS, who has the open data repo. So I stored my data there, and I give them more insights in what is in this S3 bucket. But the coolest thing is that you can package your data. So you can just make slices, kind of like Docker containers of your data. Underneath, it shares all the layers of the data. So you can make as much of packages as you want and pull them. So here, for example, I now have the non-malignant and BCC package, but I can also make the out-of-distribution package. Same data set, but just a different slice. And you can immediately, for example, like this, it's just a single line of Python code, and you can get the data. And it also does versioning, because I think that's also something that is still lacking. We have a lot of benchmark sets, but you never know if they changed it. There is no proof that it's still the same version. So I hope this kind of helps making a fair data set that allows a lot of tests. So
this is public data, no?
Yeah.
What is the licensing on this?
CC BY share alike, non-commercial. Yeah. Slapped on all the things. And we are now looking to maybe change the license a bit to make it a little bit more flexible. But I think, for example, some papers, they want that you have the C0 license. For us, it's something which feels a bit wrong, because it's like not our data, it's from people, from patients, so we can't give that away and say to the rest of the world, do with it whatever you want, because I think you still need some responsibility for this, and I think an acknowledgement at the end is fair. So that's why we put on this license for now. So this wave is coming, we know that. So in my opinion, what's next? I think everything which is not related to deep learning is now kind of what we need to do. So regulation, in my opinion, we should really speed up with that, but that can also be me as an engineer that doesn't understand regulation. But yeah, it should be a shame that the regulation is still lagging behind while we are technically advancing. So yeah, I always tell people like, come on, get this stuff as soon as possible, get it done. Because then we can focus on the implementation, because this regulation really depends on how you implement something. If you're not allowed to store your data somewhere on an external party, we really have to come up with some solution to do the to deploy algorithms on a clinical side rather than doing it in the cloud, for example. So yeah, And you also saw this example with Sectra, like it's very limited, you can show boxes, the pathologist still is not happy. So we should also put a lot of money and effort in what do we want to make with these great models. Also the cost benefit, I told you, I think a lot of models are cool, but at the end, they cost a lot of money rather than helping a lot of people. So I think it's just like a digital medicine. So like, what are these benefits? Thing is, you can, if they run, they're pretty cheap to run, these models. But I think the research is very expensive, so you should kind of maybe spend the money of like solving every disease with an algorithm, spend it more in now in regulation and implementation, get this stuff a little bit faster. Also data availability. Well, you told me a bit about here, the Bath Lake and this kind of solutions to get your data. I think it's very important. So have big pools of data easily shared with the licenses and the regulation on there. Like the moment if that is there, making all these models is fairly easy, but it's now kind of holding us back a bit. So we should work on that. IT infrastructure, I think that was the biggest challenge of my whole PhD. Yeah, because everywhere in the whole pipeline, you feel like there was even a switch in our hospital that only allowed 100 megabits. And I couldn't get my head around, like, why is it taking so long? And at the end, I had to go to the IT department. I was like, yeah, this switch is just prehistorical. Can we please change it? Because we have like terabytes of data that goes along. And you find it everywhere. And I think also like patient or health care, is it patient healthcare systems?
As in packs.
Yeah, these kind, and also why they have the other thing like extracting data from these systems. They don't even have APIs. They run on very old versions. So how can we ever make multimodal algorithms if we don't even can extract all these different multimodalities into one single format? So, and it really boils down to the IT infrastructure. So, but it's hard to sell this, right? To a hospital that we say like we need to have optical fibers rather than we can solve this rare disease. That's of course way cooler. And I think foundation models will also play a big role because then we can compress a lot of data, can easily hand it over. I think it also makes the regulation, like at the moment we agree on these foundation models. I think sharing data is easier because you kind of compress it in this unknown format and then can hand it over to another hospital. And it will speed up research quite significantly. So, but I think before we do that, and we already started with these foundation models, but I think we should first do all these topics above, and really need to solve that, because then we can get it to the actually to the clinic. Yeah, maybe I should end with a positive note. And I think is that we are still like, for example, the pathology is really in a in a premature phase, but it's like a baby grown in a big body already. I think the first digital images already started in 2016, where like departments adopted digital images, and now we're already at like fully digitized workflows. I think we already make like massive steps there, and of course integrating this AI, it's super new. We still don't know how to use it, so maybe it's me as a researcher who wants to go faster, 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 and I have to look back what we've already done. But I really hope, and I think we're heading the right way, and that we in like 10 years or something, we can really help like finding new diseases, but also fighting waves of diseases that have to come, and we can rule it out from the diagnostics. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'm gladly to answer them, and also for people online.
Brilliant. Well, yeah.
Well, I was wondering, when you have the biopsies at the beginning, in the case of ECC, I mean, I don't know anything about it, but I'd like to know what the size is of the tissue samples compared with the size of the tumor.
So all the tissue relative to the tumor.
But does that come in one piece?
Yeah. So of course it can be bigger. So it can vary. The size varies a bit. So and the biopsy is of course like a single sample from this area. But most of the times the areas are very big. So you can almost see from here at the wall. I can already see the BCC because it's such a big surface which is already there.
So yeah, we are thinking the biopsy is just taking a small amount of the tissue, then yeah, this makes it difficult to determine the margins, which is very important.
Well, yeah, these margins are just like, I don't know how they came up with it. I think they just by trial and error. Because if you take it too small, they always check the whole like piece that they cut out. They always slice it and check it afterwards. And I think at some point they just realized, like, if we make the margins a little bit larger, it's now 3 millimeters or 6 millimeters margins. And I think there they noticed that the chances of not cutting away everything, yeah, it's almost zero, that they don't find it anymore. But I think it's really from practice. There's no clever thoughts about this. But you see sampling errors a lot in other things, like for prostate, for example. They really have to just aim and make sure you hit the core of this tumor, for example, and not sample, because we always think it's not like a round ball. It's like these tumors are like everywhere, and yeah, you hope that you are kind of hitting it correctly with these biopsies. But for the skin, you don't have this issue.
Fantastic. Well, do we have any more questions from anyone in the group?
Can I ask a question about the screening?
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, typically how many screening layers do you need before it starts to become small enough so that it's the layer and fits in your GPU?
Yeah, that's a good question. There are a lot of variables. So in what resolution you are starting with, how large your images are, etc., etc. How many layers are there? I don't know by heart. It's something I need to ask Stefan, for example. I don't know. But the thing is, like, you can put any backend in there, whatever you want. So the streaming thing is only kind of allowing you to do this in this style-based thing and doing the updating for you. You can put any model, like if you want to put ResNet 50 in there, you can stream ResNet. I think that's the beauty of it. And I know that Stefan will soon release, and I think for Big Picture Consortium, it is already available, the latest version of streaming. So it's completely written in PyTorch Lightning, and there, like what he demonstrated to me, it looks very easy. Just put in your model, and the library takes care of the whole streaming part. I think that's pretty cool. Yeah, but still, it's a fight with the GPU, because you're actually like you're really trying to build this GPU as efficient as possible. Yeah, and that's the hard part. And you know, like if you work with CUDA and GPU and out of memory errors, like it's very easy to get this error. So it's kind of playing also a bit with like how big can I make this tile from my larger image, because you really want to optimize it. You can do some calculations up front, but you know, like from this memory calculations, you always a little bit of overhead somewhere. But if it works, it's super cool.
So it's obviously a really cool data set. So this Cobra data set. So I don't know if you mentioned it earlier in the slides, but how many slides are actually used in?
I now put 6,000.
6,000.
Yeah. But I now, with this new paper, I want to go to, if our department allows it, because I also have a lot of cases that I couldn't label. Because I for every case, for the BCC, if there was a biopsy with one slide, I know that the medical report, what it states there, has to be based on that image. But sometimes they don't cut correctly, and the pathologist requests another slice. And then I don't know which image they saw and based a conclusion on. So those I all removed from my data set, but those are like 7,000. And I feel like these are very good for pre-training because we don't know the label, but I think it's still useful. So I still have to convince them that we should add this to the data set. And then I think roughly 3,000 of these rare diseases comes in there. So that's really nice for the out of distribution. At the end, I think we'll go above 10,000 images.
You know the data for the case, right?
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah, but I can't pinpoint which image it is.
That's fine.
Yeah.
You would say this data is for this case.
Yeah. Yeah, because you could always, like with packing, you could always like pack the whole case together. That's also something but this, after 4 years, you realize like that I should have done it this way. But yeah, you can make like one massive image from multiple images. And feed this with streaming. That's the beauty of streaming. I can just feed in every image I want.
From the deep learning perspective, it's not a very big challenge now. It'd be nice to have the rest of the data set attached to that.
Yeah.
Really, really nice data set. I'm grateful for them.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. But also the data set was something I realized later that it was a useful data set because first you start on like solving the problem, you just start labeling and annotating images. And at some point I thought, yeah, it's super useful for other people because you have a pretty heavily curated data set now.
So I noticed you obviously had foundation models as the future or the next steps. And given that everyone's talking about foundation models and everyone's talking about multimodal foundation models across different medical imaging. So given the expertise of your group having both radiology and pathology in the same building, is there any opportunity to take this further? Is there any, can you apply radiology to skin cancer? Or is it completely pathology?
That's completely, I think it's completely, well, for example, if you have melanomas, they of course can bring satellites somewhere else in the body. So I think, and these that you do need, you will get, I don't know, some other different modality scans. But for example, we now have multimodal projects for example, prostate. That because there you have these biopsies, so maybe just by an MRI you can already kind of figure out how the pathology is looking. Based on the MRI image, or vice versa, that you can kind of put the pathology on the MRI, so you kind of build both of the modalities there. But I think most of this multimodal stuff will go towards like survivability prediction or treatment prediction, if you just gather all the information. And that's something we are going to do. But yeah, as you see there, the biggest challenge is not the model, but the data. Like if the data is streamlined, then the training, it costs a lot of money and energy to do it, but that works. But getting everything in the same format without exceptions, no holes in your data set of missing data, but it's something you see a lot. If we solve that, then we're good to go. I think this sounds easy, but still you have to do it. And data loading is also super hard to get in because the bigger these data sizes are, you can't say Ctrl+C, Ctrl+V to another location because it takes a week. So you really have to plan carefully where to store it. And we also now do a lot with AWS. And even they have all the resources you want to get, we get all. And they give you all the credits, and then still it's super hard to get it done because you're really pushing technical limitations. And that's something I really like because how can you do data loading across multiple GPUs in clusters that are on different sites and do it as fast as possible. I think that's very cool, but it's a different game you have to play. I don't know if you have any experience with that. A little bit.
We have people sort these things out.
Yeah.
And as you said, it was as part of this year, all these challenges.
Yeah, and people always forget that digital pathology is just also with these images so large, because for Amazon, then we get like some experts there who are really good, and they say, yeah, just make a static data set out of it. We're like, yeah, well, one pathology image is already a static data set of 1 million patches, so that doesn't work out for 30 or 50,000 pathology images. And they're also then scratching the back of their head, like, yeah, that's true. And they even don't know how to make this technical feasible. So I'm really impressed by the companies who managed to get it done. I'm also really curious how they did it, but they must have faced the same problems. Maybe they just brute forced it to get it done, or they came with very clever stuff. I don't know.
No, look, and they just, as you said, brute force that they extracted patches and artifacts this using training.
Yeah,
I also know another company who like done it in a really smart way. Obviously, it's harder, especially if you want to do it like but more processing way, where they get streamed from one start information file. They can store
Yeah.
patches on.
yeah. So we are also trying. So like we're also trying to stream it, but then you have to need your source file somewhere, and then you have the problem that you can't stream it as fast as that your GPU is processing it. But then, that becomes a delay. And of course, you want to have like,
That was the problem.
Yeah.
We want to really
Yeah.
wrote their own start reading tools.
just to get,
I guess,
yeah,
to be able to like read multi-processing and read fast.
yeah,
Obviously, store data fast. Service.
yeah. I would like to know how they did it.
Always, but
Yeah.
it's challenging.
Yeah, it is super challenging. That's fun, and I think that's the thing with these foundation models. Then you're entering a new technical domain with all these challenges. So I think we now with our group put like 16 people on it to get this done. Like half of it radiology, half of it pathology. So I hope, because my PhD ended, still working there for a year, so I hope to see some results before I leave. That will be very cool.
So always do that. Found that you know better than me. Like there are some file formats like ZAR that allow you for fast trading.
Which file format?
ZAR. How do you pronounce it? ZAR.
Okay.
I think that's design.
Yes.
Yeah.
Problem is that most scanner vendors, they don't store their file in that. So if you want to do that, you have to convert.
That's
that was the also that the file there as well.
That's also what we are now seeing. Like we thought, like, okay, patches is silly, so we do this H5 or whatever way of storing it. But then you are kind of doing like months of pre-processing to get everything into this format.
It is challenging.
Yeah. So I think streaming this data makes more sense. And that the solution, the key is somewhere in there. But then we just need to do that faster, quicker.
Fantastic. Well, do you have any more questions from anyone in the group? Brilliant then. Well, shall we, as we are coming towards 3 o'clock, shall we call this meeting to a close then?
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dan, for a really interesting talk, and obviously for flying over and visiting us. And Dan's, of course, here for the next couple of days. So please come in, say hello, and I think we'll have a bit of a check around the department again. And I know people are going to have some small presentations / small discussion points. So
and I'm also, of course, like I'm not alone, so I'm kind of representing the catalog of our group. So if you have any project where you think like, I would really search someone who can maybe help me with this project, just ask me, and maybe I can pinpoint you to the right person. Because I think like doing stuff together, especially now with all the Zoom and the meetings, very easy to work with someone online. So this, if you can find me.
fantastic. Well, thank you very much, everyone online, and thank you, everyone in person.
Yeah, and thank you again for inviting me. Really fun.